What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Ihsahn of Emperor and his great solo work. Thank you so much for being here. It is great to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I feel like I finally have this is the most appropriate background I have for this interview because it's really funny when I'm interviewing like a just a soft rock band and I have this in the background, so feels very appropriate.
But now I'm countering you with my trekking clothes and a white normal background. So
well, I think
I'm sorry to disappoint.
with your catalog alone, you already outdid it, so it's all good. But it's so great to have you here because with this new self-titled album, it's really just a magical experience. I feel the way that you open up with that very epic, atmospheric introduction and then take us to this rawness. It's really beautiful. I've noticed when a band makes their album self-titled late in their career, it kind of represents sort of like a significant change and represents sort of like a new era or kind of like finding themselves. Is there a reason why this was self-titled versus a title like Arctis or After or whatnot?
Well, it was much more mundane, than that. I think I didn't realize, people expected it to be such a statement. To me, it's either the first album of some artist or somewhere down the line, and that you make a self-titled one. And given the complexities of being two versions and two storylines and all these things that kind of interlock and conceptually and everything, it was hard to find a title that I felt captured the album. And although there were so many new elements to me, trying to put this puzzle together where the orchestrations, supported the metal arrangements, but also functioned individually as their own thing. This kind of the interweaving just musically of leitmotifs, and it was quite a big puzzle. But the ingredients were very, very traditional for me, like black metal band, screaming vocals, traditional symphony orchestra setup. So I've written like a very normal score. And the storyline is very typical. The symbolism I play with harkening to Dionysus and Apollo and all this is very like archetypical ingredients. So and also kind of compared to some of my later EPs that I released that was very, one in one direction and one in the other. This is kind of down the center of what I've been doing since the beginning, given the ingredients, if you will. So I felt this was as good a time as any.
When you start an album, because like as this could just be being analyzing it, but I'm also a big fan of your work. But like if you played me 30 seconds of an Ihsahn album, I could tell that that's off of Arctis or that's off of After, that's off of A Mirror from 2018, and this one. Do you ever start the album off with a vision in mind or like a preconceived goal or concept, or is it a very like organic experimental songwriting process?
It's always with this almost like an impulse, and it's very hard to know when it occurs. It is like at the risk of sounding very metaphysical and all about it, it's like suddenly I can hear and feel the album inside. In a sense, I know what it's going to sound like and feel like, but of course there's not based on any music or anything. It's like, as I said, more like an impulse, and then it's just start digging, and I create, what do you call them, for lack of a better word, like a mood board. I do write-ups and kind of what kind of harmonic language, what kind of arrangement, textures and colors and lyrical ideas. It's this mashup of everything. So when I have that kind of blueprint goal in a sense, never an abstract way, then I start, applying music to that, and hopefully having, the kind of bigger goal in mind. It's easier to create something that hopefully points in the same direction.
When you work based on an impulse or or like an emotional experience, do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to sort of maintain that emotion and hold on to that in a way? Do you like to maybe feel the same way when you finish something as you do when you start it?
Well, I think it's more a method of keeping focus, because obviously in as you say, you create a lot yourself, and in periods, you may have different ideas, but when you kind of have the overall goal and have kind of made it a solid scaffolding or a sketch of what you want to achieve, the new ideas, it's like pieces of a puzzle. So if I write something for this album, if I was noodling around and came up with a guitar riff that was more pentatonic, like old school Rocky, if you hold that up as a piece of the puzzle against this blueprint, you would see it doesn't fit. So it's easier to kind of sort ideas and whatever comes along towards that main objective.
Well, do you need to hear the music before you know what it's about in a way? Like, do you, you create on this impulse, but then there's also a lyrical concept and subject matter as well. Do you need to have like the full composition written before you know what the material is about? Or could maybe a concept in mind help guide the sound in itself as well?
No, this to me, it needs to add up. Is it like from these initial write-ups? Is like is the sound a close sound or a distant sound? Is it for the album? Is it supposed to be electronic like or texturized, or is it going to be very organic? Is it inside? Is it outside? It's very abstract concepts, but this honestly, most of the time I have no idea how I end up in the place. It's going by instinct. It's like you're digging for something, and then you see the tip of it, and you kind of imagine what's underneath, and you just have to use all your tools to kind of dig it out. You kind of know, but you don't know.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
No,
Yeah.
It definitely does. But what I've always found fascinating about Emperor is that I do wonder always what the lyrics are going to be about. Because I know you tackle very personal subject matters. I believe After was a very personal album, and I really get those chills when I hear like the clean vocals incorporated in that title track. But like the historical references in an album like Nine Equilibrium, for example, I feel like is very, it really does teach me a lot of things about the external world around us. So depending on what the material is about, does it maybe resonate with you when you revisit that material and when you replay it?
It all depends. I mean, it's these days. I mean, we do a lot of Emperor shows, and it's kind of old songs are often embedded in me in a similar way than that. Regardless of whether I was part of writing the music or it was just stuff that I was a fan of. You especially in your teenage years and early 20s, you kind of you make the music that's part of your life also the soundtrack of your life. And then when you revisit that material, those songs, whether it's your own songs or other bands and other artists that you listen to, it takes you back to that. And for sure there are definitely Emperor lyrics where I by singing them, they conjure up the same images and stories in my head as when I wrote them, and that's just like by association. And I guess with everything, it all depends. So some songs from my catalog stick with me like that, and others are more, almost like you forgot them and rediscover them.
Yeah.
But it's not like I do not listen to a lot of my own music down the line. I have more than enough listening to the more contemporary stuff.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I know you're not alone in that either. But, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I've always said that, an artist's catalog is a great representation on how time is relative. Because, for instance, I was a total late bloomer with Emperor. I'm 30 years old. That album came out when I was 1. I wasn't listening to Emperor at 1. I didn't start getting into Emperor or black metal in general, until I was like in my mid-20s. So when people listen to In the Nightside Eclipse and they say, oh, this brings me back to 1994, for me, it brings me back to 2015, when I started getting into that style. Like that's how it kind of has that sort of reflection towards it, you know?
Yeah, but it's been kind of interesting to see it. Sometimes I've just pondered why do you know people, as I said, like your age, you know, discover this stuff. One thing is if it's kind of part of your that decade or whatever, but for some reason we become that band that, you know, dads take their kids to see the old band. You know, but I often ponder, you know, why is that? And I like to think that because we were so young, you know, like I was 17 when we did Eclipse, and of course you're a different person, and we didn't have a lot of experience, anything, but what we lacked in experience we made up for by conviction and dedication, you know, and quite possibly, you know, what you put in is what you get out of it. And I like to think that young people are, you know, who discover this music now, they're probably in a similar space, and it resonates. You know, it mirrors how they feel.
Yeah.
You know, so and if you look at it in a bigger picture, I was just recently in Germany and attended an exhibition that focused on human celebration. You know, from the antique until today. And of course, you know, there's so many things we think that we're moving forward, but all these existential crises that we go through, and you know, what are our lives, you know, of ambitions and love and loss and hate and tragedy and all of this, it's universal and it's nothing new. You know, even if you read Confucius, you know, that is, it predates even the antique, you know, it's still dealing with the same core stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really no wonder that it's music, which some theorize even predates language as a way of communication.
Yeah.
You know, that has a kind of lasting and universal impact.
Well, also too, because one thing I respect about you as a songwriter is I could tell that you're not trying to repeat history, because even with Emperor, like 9 Equilibrium, I think is a very different album from Into the Night Side Eclipse. I think that there's a lot of different, you know, a lot of differences in there. And when you followed up Night Side Eclipse with Anthems, it just seems like it didn't feel like a direct sequel in a way. And to top that off, you know, we haven't heard a new Emperor album in a long time, but when you look at the Adversary onward to your solo work, I think that same sort of evolution is demonstrated.
Well, you know, it's hard for me to see how other people perceive it, of course, being in the middle of things. But I think from the outside, you know, as you know, Emperor was part of a black metal scene that became like a phenomenon, you know, outside of whoever was the member, and it's associated with, you know, like a cultural phenomenon in the time. But of course, being in the process is an entirely different thing. And I don't, what do you call it, compartmentalize these things in the same way. And I mean, some people ask me, like, how come you end up doing all this experimental stuff and, you know, this and that and left and right and everything, when you come from Emperor, you know? And to me that's contradictory, because we were, you know, 16, 17 and already trying to push forward, you know, more extreme, you know, more than, you know, Morbid Angel and Deicide and stuff like that. You know, we came from Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Kiss and Twisted Sister and went our way through Metallica and Slayer, then Morbid Angel and Deicide and, you know, death metal, and just wanted more. That 16, 17, at least speaking of myself, my ambition was to kind of try to push further, you know, new ground, you know, for myself. Like, of course, there were no commercial motivations at all when you started Black Metal Band in 91. Quite the contrary. And why would I stop that journey at 18? You know, so like my impulse for doing this in the first place is my excitement for making music and follow that trajectory and still feel that urge and almost obsession to create and to explore and discover new music outside of myself and in myself. It's especially since I was so fortunate to, as a consequence of me being so single-minded, it became my career, and which means I could spend even more time doing it. So why would I ever do it on the premises of, considering the, commercial aspects of what people expect or anything? It's and I think if you made this kind of music on those premises, it just wouldn't work.
If you can't focus, you mentioned you work on an impulse. So when you were creating Cosmic Keys of My Creation in Time and March Towards the Pantheon, you weren't thinking about Prometheus, Fire, and Demise. And I think when you were creating The Adversary, there's no way you were thinking about this self-titled record now. So I think you just really had to focus on the now. And I feel like your music does very much capture a moment and really does bring in different sources. And you led me perfectly into another question I wanted to ask you, because when it comes to that artistic drive or that inspiration, is inspiration really something you could seek out? Can you really go looking for it, or is it something that you just that just has to strike you?
You have to show up, as they say. It's in my younger days, I think I was spending too much time sitting around waiting for inspiration. And we're all faced with that blank page and imposter syndrome and all these things. But at the end of the day, I was scared when we started a family and small kids, and out of practicality, you have to kind of, it's much more of a linear process. You have to work within certain hours and such. And I thought, well, how on earth could I possibly focus and be creative within those limitations? But arguably, if you look at the last 20 years or so, I've probably been more productive than I ever was prior to that. So routine and being ready. You can never really predict when the muse will show up, as they say. But you have to be there, and be ready for it. And honestly, as they say with all kind of creativity, it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. So like it's you find the ideas, but it's not like a complete song, falls into your head. There are musical themes and building blocks, and then there's there's a lot of practical craftsmanship to making it into what it needs to be, which takes up most of the time. And I would just highly recommend, Rick Rubin's book on creativity.
Oh my God!
Because he really he just really nails it. Like there's nothing about ego. There's nothing about the business and people's expectations. You just have to turn all that stuff off and just try and link into the universal ideas that are out there. This kind of source of creativity, and try to create something through your own distorted lens. And if nothing else, if you do it for yourself, even if no one else likes it, no one can take away that feeling, that relationship you have to what you create. Mm-hmm. Everything else is a bonus. And I know it's easy for me to say that because I was very fortunate to have people be interested in what I did. But I think if it was otherwise, if my ambitions for entering into and doing what I do would be to get recognized and have all sorts of recognition or money or fame or anything, I don't think I would have made anything worthwhile listening to.
You never know. I mean, you can only wonder, right? Because like there's some bands that became super famous and super huge, and maybe that kind of lit the fire under their ass to kind of write something even better to appeal in a way. Like, while it's never good to be a people pleaser by any means, I feel like people resonating with something could serve as a means of motivation in a way, because
it's quite possibly. But I think, so it's not like you're immune, but it's also just from my experience, having done this for such a long time, that the only thing I can control is how, well I'm feeling, how enthusiastic and how excited I am for making new music. You know, to put myself in a position where I'm truly, you know, enjoying and feel driven to do what I do. That's the only thing I can control. How people react to it down the line, I have no control over. And I've seen that from experience. You know, the early Emperor records you mentioned, by the major metal medias and stuff at the time, they were frowned upon. We were the laughing stock of heavy metal, you know. And then they decided it was the worst, you know. And then some decades passed, and like someone else thinks it's something. Then they decided, oh, this is amazing. You know, you look on if that's going to be the guiding star of how you feel about yourself, then we'll all be screwed.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. You can't let other people's judgments dictate who you are, but it is also a great means of learning and inspiration. What I actually wanted to ask you too is because I feel like art is life, and when you create something, it can grow and it could develop. It could even die sometimes as well. But when people resonate with your music, when people, you know, feel the darkness of Emperor really resonating with them, or they feel like, you know, the serenading elements and the heavy elements of your solo work, do you believe that their interpretations of your music maybe adds another layer of meaning or context to it?
I just think it's in a similar way that I've in this process, for example, of this new album, which is highly conceptual. There's a very clear storyline behind it in my head, but I've been very reluctant to be too concrete about what it's about. First of all, because it's not really reinventing the wheel in any way. It's a very classical story. But also, I never liked when the artists that I like, you know, superimposed their own interpretation. It was always about my experience of it, you know. And in a similar way, so it's not for me to try to be secretive and mystical. It's just like I don't want to superimpose, you know, concretely what I mean. It's not something to understand. It's something to feel, you know. It's and in a similar way, as you say, in you kind of notice very concretely in the live scenario when you're performing these songs that you have a relationship to yourself or as a band, and then you have people in the audience with their experience kind of relating to the same songs, but which might be something totally different. They may have attached other memories, you know, so many other memories and so many other interpretations from their own lives into it, but the kind of the core energy is the same, and that kind of multiplies. You know, sometimes that can happen during a live show where there's this kind of connection of you're kind of experiencing the same thing, but it's more abstract than something that we put into words. Well, which I think is maybe the purpose of a lot of art, that we communicate the stuff that we don't really have words for.
Well, going by Ihsahn, we know you as Ihsahn, and do you? I mean, and I've asked every musician in black metal this. I spoke with Necro Butcher about this. I spoke with Frost of Satyricon about this, and I've just always wondering too, because we see the name Ihsahn, we see Ihsahn on stage. Do you feel like maybe you do portray somebody, whether it will be a character or a persona, outside of your element when you're expressing yourself through this music? You're expressing this concept now. So is there sort of like an Ihsahn mode that you go into in a way?
No, not really. And people sometimes they think it's awkward to use my real, you know, my given name or my artist name. To me, it's just like a nickname. I answer easily to both. It's like we all have nicknames. So to me, I don't differentiate. And it's of course, when I play live shows, or when I'm recording, of course you enter this kind of mode where you kind of, you know, you leave your ego and your personal self on the side of the stage, and you let the music, you know, do the talking. You're just a vessel channeling that. Again, I think the more we can leave ego and, you know, it being about ourselves as persons, the better. Yeah. You know, as you know, more focus on the channeling and less, you know, about look at me. You know.
Yeah, and in addition, you're also playing music with different people. Because Samoth has his fantastic background with the work that he's done, but I know you've also created a fantastic work with Heidi and Starofash, if I pronounced that correctly. But like, so when it comes to creating with different people, it almost seems like that who you are also has to maybe be adjusted or changes the process as well, right? Do you almost kind of need to be in the same emotional headspace as the people you collaborate with?
It all depends on what role you have. I mean, for the most part, when I'm collaborating, it's usually, like with Star of Ash, I'm just, I'm a support, engineering, whatever. And when I create, Heidi is a sparring partner, bounce off ideas. It's like when you, I'm not sure, do you make music?
I play piano, but I haven't made an album or anything like that.
No, but it's like when you're working on something, and but I'm sure if you visualize, it might be the same thing. But you're very focused on the thing yourself, and then someone else comes into the room, and it's like you're loaning their ears, and you listen to it in a different way just because of their presence. Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
Yeah. And in a similar way, and like during the pandemic, suddenly I had time to finally produce, this solo album for Matifi of Trivium, Ibaraki.
It was incredible, by the way. That was amazing.
Thank you. No, that was really interesting, because then I always thought that, because I've only been doing my own albums, in one way or the other, just being the artist myself, and then you think that it's the albums and the catalog that is the only product. But of course, doing that, of course, Matt was very forgiving, and he's the nicest guy, and like so easy to work with. So it made my debut as a producer very, very easy. But still, that realization that, it's not just the albums. I have some methods and some kind of a toolbox that may be applicable to someone else's creative needs as well. And I can sit back, and I don't have to be. It's not my heart that has to be on the chopping board. I could kind of lend my methods and perspective and toolbox of how to do things that may differ. And then that may be the case. Most of the time, collaboration is like often an interchange of musical favors, like me singing on someone else's record and they doing like a solo on my record, more like a friendly interchange of musical color.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I never would have thought in a million years I would hear a song that combines Emperor, Trivium, and My Chemical Romance in one song, which I think is which I thought was an incredible concoction. Like, I love it when something sounds very obscure on paper and then you hear it and it's a match made in heaven.
Well, and it could be the other way around as well, because in the process of doing a lot of press now, I've been asked like, well, who would be your dream, collaborator? I don't know, apart from the people that I've been so fortunate to work with already, it's like there are obviously lots of artists and musicians that I truly admire, but that doesn't mean that combining this name to this name, would actually make, be a chemistry that would work in a good way, and other times, people, again, single out like, okay, Matifi from Trivium is doing something different than, is so different from what I did in Emperor, or Gerard Way doing My Chemical Romance, and they think it's all this doesn't add up. Mm-hmm. Why do these people even know each other? But in my experience, it's more about, the people that I gravitate towards are the people who have the same core passion. I mean, and we also let's face it, we all grew up on Iron Maiden. That's why we did do this in the first place, Judas Priest. Many years ago, I was like at Metal Hammer Awards, something like that. A lot of different people, and I met Alto from him.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I didn't know him. But it's like we just stood next to us, started talking, and of course, on paper, you would say that me and him have been doing quite different things musically. We appeal to a different crowd of audience, you could argue. But he was there in his original Summer in Time Iron Maiden t-shirt, and as my favorite band growing up was Iron Maiden. So, we just like the passion drove us in different directions, but I mean, the motivation and driving force is the same.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, I feel I have more in common with some of the authors, and that it's like 3 times my age, not anymore, but like when I met them, but like and folk musicians, then I have a lot of people in the black metal scene, because it's just you resonate with people who kind of come from the same not hard to say same perspective, but has a similar driving force. And so some people and I think I understand why people think it's interesting with the black metal scene and the phenomenon and the history and all that. Like that's all good, and some people are really interested in that, both people outside and also people who were part of the scene. For me personally, I never got it, the collective thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not dissing it at all. It's just like it's not for me. And as if we want to talk about who's who and what happened when and what in the Norwegian black metal scene, you need to speak to someone else, because I can't recall.
Before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for such an awesome conversation. Is there just anything else with the release of this brand new self-titled album that you would like to promote? Any shows coming up? Anything with Emperor or Star of Ash, or what else we could be expecting in the near future? Or Leprous as well, that I know you collaborate with Einar very well.
Yeah, it's I'd like to. I hope that it's announced. We're playing Tunisia,
Really?
with Leprous and my solo thing. So we might be doing some cool stuff together there, because as you said, we have some collaborations from the past, and but I'm just excited to start getting this new material on stage. I think the material lends itself well to the live environment, and I'm excited to do that. And then we'll be playing around the world with Emperor, and the solo things is still booking. So
Awesome.
Excited about that.
I just interviewed a band from Tunisia right before you, so that's
wow.
Mirath.
Great.
Yeah, but awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your support. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, it was an honor to speak to you. Thank you, everybody. We are here with Ihsahn of Emperor as well as Ihsahn. Be sure to check out their self-titled album. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.